Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Coffee and Contemplation brought to you by Spotlight Recovery. I'm your host, Lucas. It is May 5th, aka Revenge of the 5th. If you thought I was just doing one Star Wars one, you're wrong. We're going back to back today. But again, don't let it deter you. Don't let it run you away. There's some great quotes in here that have some really neat overlaps and perspectives in recovery that I want to play around with for you. Pardon for this being a little late this morning. I was up watching another heartbreaking Maple Leafs playoff game loss because, I don't know, I still like to suffer, I guess. Even in my recovery, I'm still doing this work. Oh, boy. So anyway, let me just pop this up on the screen. And remember, if you're just listening to audio, we've got the link in the description so you can read along with these two and save them on your phone. So anyway, let's get into this. Revenge of the 5th. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. My Yoda. There is nothing wrong with fear. You need never be ashamed of it, as long as it doesn't stop you from functioning. Fear is your natural warning system. It keeps you alive so that you can fight. Show me a man who isn't afraid, and I'll show you a fool who is a danger to his entire ship. The dark is generous, and it is patient, and it always wins. But in the heart of its strength lies its weakness. One lone candle is enough to hold it back. Love is more than a candle. Love can ignite the stars. This is a great short one. Reality doesn't care if you believe it. Boba Fett, I love that. And of course, the classic, I find your lack of faith disturbing. Darth Vader. Oh man. Yeah, so there's obviously me being a giant Star Wars fan and nerd aside, I think there's some really good knowledge in these quotes and some real good application for us in recovery as well. So this first one, right, in the title of this, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. I mean, just that progression, I think is so strong. And I personally had this experience very much in my addiction. Fear was one of the great motivators for me. You know, like a lot of us in addiction, when we fall farther into addiction, we think addiction is the main focus and driver for everything. That's the motivator. It's just, how do I feed the addiction? How do I get more of this? And it's one of those debates on, I guess it depends on the moment or the time of day, where I don't know which is stronger. Is that the stronger drive of I need to feed the addiction, so I'm doing whatever I can in order to do that? Or is the main drive fear, and therefore I now am turning to my addiction to cope with the fear? So then that actually is the main driver. You know, and as addicts, we, as our disease gets stronger, we really have a hard time facing reality, so which is where that other line of reality doesn't care if you believe it, I love and I think is so applicable to just life in recovery, fighting with addiction, and also just connection with all these other quotes, you know. But anyway, so in our addiction, I mean, one of the main things of addiction is just avoiding reality at all costs and pretending it doesn't exist. And this is how I cope with it instead, you know. So I have fear as this massive motivator. Just, and like a big thing for me with addiction was just I didn't have the right coping skills and tools to be able to deal with my fears. I had no faith that I was going to be okay, which is why I threw in that Darth Vader line at the bottom there. I find your lack of faith disturbing. It's just that fun dark side twist on just the concept of faith and needing it, right? So anyway, I was in the space of having this root, this baseline of fear at all times. Oh, sorry for that. Just feeling fear was the go-to response. It was very overwhelming. It was very strong. I then had, of course, issues with accepting the fact that whatever these things I may have been afraid of could have been my reality. So therefore, I am wanting to avoid and this at all cost and sweep it under the rug, everything like that. If I don't have the right coping skills to deal with my reality, I'm going to run, avoid, be in denial, whatever it may be, right? And the other part too, I had no faith that I was going to be okay. I had no faith that things were going to work out, no faith in myself to be able to overcome and face these fears and actually deal with life head on. So that's just where all these things are really standing out to me and where I really related to them as an addict, especially earlier on. This is a lot more childhood stuff for me. I have a lot of childhood trauma, and so that was kind of what, I don't know if I was born an addict or became an addict at a very young age, but either way, these were a lot of those root fears. And then when trauma hits, again, if you're not having that treated properly, you then can be stuck in that moment where the traumatic events took place. And then that can also like stunt your growth and your development. So that's where I relate with all of this very much. So that's where I got stuck in these things. And then where I came a 5-year-old becoming 20, still having these same mentalities. The same mentality, only then just turning to addiction more to try to cope with it, drown it out, avoid it, whatever it may be, right? So anyway, we're kind of tying like 3 of these lines in here together, but like I said, I think there's a lot of good flow and connection in them, not only from their wording themselves, but also for addiction and recovery, which is why I wanted to chat about them. So I hope you're relating with them too, because they really stand out for me. So yes, back with this first line, fear leads to anger. Anger is a very typical, not even just human, just animal response. Anger is a very typical response to fear, right? We are scared, therefore we think, or depending on, we may need to fight, therefore let's get angry, let's pump ourselves up, right? So that was another thing that I did a lot too. And why as an addict, I was just having this irrational anger all the time, everywhere, in inappropriate places, like where when I would get angry, people would look at me kind of with that funny look on their face and tilt in their head, just being like, what are you doing? Like, where is this coming from? Because it was so irrational, but they didn't know or understand the fear that I was living with. So then therefore, this became that automatic response, right? To try to cope and deal with, or to quote unquote protect myself, right? So there's that. Then that progression of anger leads to hate. Oh my gosh. I mean, if you're like me, I don't need to explain to you how big resentments are for addicts. Resentments, oh my gosh, that was one of my main drivers. Whoa, what's going on here? Go away, computer thing. There we go. Pardon me. That was one of my main drivers, and the things that I got stuck and suffered in so much was resentment. And that became then a huge driver and fuel for my behavior, for everything, for just the way that I lived. It consumed me. And very much as they talk about in Star Wars on giving into the dark side and letting that consume you, I think these things, that anger, my resentment, these fears, letting these things consume me, was very much what was happening. It would, again, big contributors to my addiction and why I was using so much. And then there's that last point, which ties all that up. Hate leads to suffering, right? I mean, you may have heard that adage of resentment is like drinking poison and expecting somebody else to die. And so on top of that, just feeling all of these things, living in this fear, especially when it was very self-centered and self-focused, attempting then to use anger or letting my anger run wild as a response to fear, a potentially, well, at times maladaptive coping mechanism to fear when it was in an inappropriate time, letting that run wild, and then letting my resentments take over and just fueling and sitting in all of those things instead results in my suffering. It results in my suffering, and I feel for a lot of us, just because we are humans on this planet with other people, we're naturally social, we're not the only ones that suffer. Anybody who is in arm's length is going to suffer with me. And then that even got worse with, I'm going to sound old, with social media and with cell phones, because now anybody that I can message can suffer too. My reach is now much farther beyond the length of my arm, and I can bring as much down with me as possible if I want and if I reach for it. So it's just, oh man, all these things really stood out a lot and really resonated with my addiction, my addict brain, how it all felt, how it operated. So I wanted to bring up and talk about these. So I hope these are connecting with you too. There's something else I was wanting to say. I'm worried it may have just slipped off. With that. Well, I feel like it's right there. Roll with me here, people. Nope. And there goes the pressure. Okay, we'll see if it comes back around as I do these other quotes. Thanks for bearing with me there. Oh, but there's just so much stuff running around with all of this. Oh, yeah, there we go. Haha. Okay. So, and then the other part with that too, because it then becomes beyond me that just suffers. Like I said, anybody in arm's reach or anybody I could reach out to, then could or will suffer with me if I choose. And I'm in that addict space and in this like sick part of my mind doing that damage. I also think, so then with this, the flip side of that, because I think a lot of us, I have faith in generally more people being good and wanting to do good. I really do. And a lot of addicts, you may have heard me say this before, I feel that we're typically very emotional people. I think being highly emotional is a part of addiction too. I think that comes with the disease. And that's why a lot of us have such strong responses and fall into our addiction so hard, is because we're so emotional and we don't know how else to cope and deal with that. So another part with this, and what I'm talking about with all of these points of then hate leading to suffering, we making others suffer, this is then where that isolation piece comes in, because we don't want to hurt other people. We don't want to hurt others. We don't want to do any damage. Others care about us and we don't understand why. So we don't want them to see us suffer and them to see how bad we're doing. So there's another part then. So this is where the isolation thing comes in. Now, this isn't a blanket statement for all isolation with all addiction, but I think it's another really big contributor to this that gets overlooked a lot. And a lot of people just like look more on the surface level and are like, oh, I just want to use in peace and I don't want to share my stash and I want to create this perfect little environment to use how I want, when I want, where I want. So I don't want anybody else to fuck with that. Yeah, sure, those can all be true as well, like DBT, right? Both of these things can coexist at the same time. But I actually think that the not wanting others to suffer on our account may be a bigger contributor for this isolation. Just from all the work that I've been doing with people and seen over the years, I think that one may be the over 50%. I really do. So that's something I want you to kind of think about and take away from this, just to help understand where that isolation came from. And especially this is for, family members, partners, whatever, to help understand too, because so many of them are just shocked and blown away by how much we push them away and run away and create this space and distance and everything. So hopefully this then can help bring them some solace too, of understanding why we isolate, because I think that's another really big part of it too. We can get in this, just to kind of sum all this up, we can get in this huge emotional turmoil between fear, anger, hate, resentment. The result of all of this is suffering. We don't know how to stop it, especially when our addiction takes over and when it's consumed by this entirely. And all we know is that we are feeling all of this, and if you're connected with us, you're going to feel it too. So I need to get away from you as far as possible, so I keep all this suffering to myself. So I hope that makes sense. I hope this gives a good little window and snapshot just around some more addict behavior, because I don't think it's talked about enough, and it makes a lot of sense, and it really fuels a lot of behavior in the disease. So anyway, pardon me. Oh, allergies. Woo! Good old spring. Yeah. All right. Anyway, there's all of that piece. These two other quotes are really powerful as well that I want to get into a bit. So this then talks about another flip side with fear. The first talks about all the negatives and what fear can do and where it can take you. And then this talks about another side, more on coping with fear, facing it head on, being honest, openly honest about it. So anyway, this one's great. There is nothing wrong with fear. You need never be ashamed of it as long as it doesn't stop you functioning. Fear is your natural warning system. It keeps you alive so that you can fight. Show me a man who isn't afraid, and I'll show you a fool who is a danger to his entire ship. Oh man, that is so good. That is so good. Oh my gosh. So I love, there's a couple things we can get into here. I love the one of it, just smashing this egotistical, especially typically more like societally male focused view of being fearless and all of that ridiculous mentality. I think personally, yeah, fearless and acting and pretending like you're fearless. In general, you're probably just being stupid. Again, back with the reality doesn't care if you believe it line. You are then just ignoring real danger of what could actually be happening and not looking at that honestly or holistically, and then just resulting in a lot more potential for you and anyone else involved or in arm's length to get hurt. It just doesn't make any sense. And that's another very typical one for people, is pretending that they're fearless and acting like they're fearless. And you may have heard me say on this show before the difference between being fearless and then being courageous. All right, and courage is acting in the presence of fear. And so then that being the much healthier response and approach to things. So I really like that a lot more. So I like that they talk about this and this being like, look, fearless is nuts, and we don't, it's such a funny thing to say. It's like, we don't always need to be so afraid of fear. Like it's, you can, and this is oh my gosh, my allergies. Wow, I was not ready for this at all. Good Lord. Apologies, folks. Man, I'm allergic to everything. Okay. So that's another classic thing for addicts and like with addiction is we will feel fear. And I was talking about this in this earlier quote, and have no healthy coping mechanisms around this, not having the right tools and knowing how to deal with this or look at it. So the fear comes up, we will feel this emotion of fear, and then just immediately almost not be able to look at it, right? Not be able to look at it, feel it. We need to shove it away, get it out of here, ignore it, use over it, deny, pretend it doesn't exist, whatever it may be. A lot of us will take that response. And so in recovery, this is such an important skill and tool to be able to build, is being able to have fear. The fear comes up. Okay. Acknowledge it. Let it be present. Like, this is some really good psychotherapy work here right now, but it's true. Feel that fear. Let it exist. Let it be there, and be able to engage in some self-regulation in the meantime, so you don't let that fear then overwhelm you and panic you and run you over. And just be able to then dissect and understand what the fear is. Then, is it real or not? Is there some truth or validity to it? Okay, if there is, can I do something about it or not? Like all of these skills are really important for recovery. And for a lot of folks that struggle with addiction, they're either having to learn and develop these skills for the first time, or their addiction at points took over for so long and became so powerful, you need to relearn how to use this skill or how to reapply it now and apply it to a life in recovery now that you're abstinent, So that's another big piece with this too that I really liked. And like, that's what stood out for me the most with this and that I wanted to talk about. Is all of that understanding and learning how to do all of this work in recovery, because it's so important. And I mean, like, just talking about how fear is such a powerful motivator for us in addiction, then therefore developing coping schools, coping skills and tools, coping tools and a support system around this to help you deal with fear, whatever it may be, you're now warding off relapse. This is one of the biggest protections you can create for relapse and for addiction, to then not go back to using. So it's so important. Very powerful stuff. Yes, it's hard. It's complicated. It's a lot. It takes a lot of time and practice. So what? In theory, if you want to be in recovery for the rest of your life, like I do, you have the rest of your life to work on this stuff. And you know that you could keep living in your addiction until that probably ends your life a lot earlier than it would need to. So just make this choice and the decision, work on that acceptance for yourself, on being able to be doing this work in your recovery, getting a bit better at it each day. Like you've got in theory the rest of your life and all this time to work on it. Don't let that intimidate you or run you over. It's so doable. It's totally okay. Right? So anyway, just wanted to throw that in there too. And I like this other point that they mentioned as well. Fear is your natural warning system. It keeps you alive so that you can fight, right? So that's just another good point that I like that they mentioned to talk about as well. It is just like why we feel these fears, right? Coming from that reptilian brain, right? Fight, flight, freeze, flee, whatever it may be, right? This is just such a natural thing for us that comes up, and exactly a natural warning system, and I'll keep you alive, let you know when you need to fight, when you need to get into action to protect and take care of yourself. So why would we want to avoid this and ignore this? You know, it is so important. It's so crucial. And I think that's another interesting piece, just because that warning system lies in the same place in our brain as our addiction, as our disease. So then it also is kind of like, I'm just answering my own question. There's no wonder then that these things can get muddled because they're coming from that same like operating system in our brain, if you will. So that makes total sense then. So what it's like that they mention that as well, back when they're saying that there's nothing wrong with fear. It's like fear is there to help keep you alive and be present and be aware of your surroundings and all of these things. A lot of things that when we're in addiction just get shut down completely, you know? So it's another good thing that they mention and talk about that I like, because it's another important perspective for us to have that I really think, you know? I think one of the best ways we can help cope with something is by first accepting the fact that we need to cope with it, that it is real, that it is a real thing in our lives. We're just going to have to do that. So I like that they mention and talk about that too. Work on that acceptance piece first. It's going to make actually dealing with this stuff a lot easier, right? So, oh yeah, we're going to finish on this. The dark is generous and it is patient, and it always wins. But in the heart of its strength lies its weakness. One lone candle is enough to hold it back. Love is more than a candle. Love can ignite the stars. Oh my God, so powerful. So powerful. Oh, so again, for some, we may be getting into a little bit of that hippy dippy shit now, and I'm totally loving it. I'm in the mood for it, especially just with this, because it's just such that great, just this great point to finish on and look at of just like, like, have you ever heard, pardon me, that line of your disease, your addict is out in the parking lot doing push-ups waiting for you, you know? Well, I found that very much true, just because in this concept of our addiction currently today is incurable. It's always going to be there. It's always a part of us. Well, the same with darkness, the same with this option of like, look, the dark can always be there. Going to the dark, going to these negative spaces is always an option for us. That's always something that we could do. And it is patient. Like it says, is very much true. Addicts, typically, we are not. Versus our disease and darkness is. It is eternally patient because it can always be there for us. And so having this understanding that that is there, that always will be there, And that's always a road we could go down if we're not taking care of ourselves and living a life in recovery, is very important to know and to be aware of. Again, not being fearless, honestly facing a true fear here. And the but here that they mention is huge. And this is the thing for us to be focusing on. It's not that darkness is always there, so not to feel hopeless and terrified of that. The other side, it's to understand that one lone candle is enough to hold back the darkness. One little glimmer of hope, one little piece of brightness, of light, is all that it takes to diminish darkness. That's all it takes. And I love that they take it beyond the piece of just light or hope. They go straight to love, which is, I think, one of the reasons why, probably the reason why we live. But anyway, love is more than a candle. Love can ignite the stars. Oh, God, I'm getting emotional just like reading that. Like, the power of that stuff is just so good and so strong. And so I just love this perspective and this approach of, okay, yep, the darkness is and can always be there. That can always be something that can take us down, like our addiction. Therefore, go to love instead. Use love instead as the response. Love yourself, love others, continue doing that work, not looking for or having that outside pressure, looking for love from anybody else to make you whole or to fix you. Work on doing that love yourself and bringing love into your life and into the lives of others to then diminish the darkness. It just, oh man, it is so powerful, and it has been so powerful in my life and in my recovery, and just been proven and shown for me through my life experience of just the greatest thing to live for, you know? Oh, man. Yep. Oh, I'm too emotional now. I can't think anymore past that. My brain's all mashed potato-y, thinking all lovey. Oh, man. Oh, so there we go. There's a little twist I bet you didn't expect coming at the end of a Revenge of the Fifth reflection day, but it did. Caught me off guard too a little bit. Oh, man. Oh, so thank you for listening to today's episode of Coffee and Contemplation. I really hope you enjoyed that and that these resonated with you. For whatever platform you're on, please do some form of subscription and liking and sharing this if you enjoyed it, because it really helps us and it can hopefully carry that message to and help others, which is the whole point, right? In the descriptions, we've got a copy of the reflection today, other ways that Spotlight Recovery can support you through private recovery coaching, a blog and newsletter, other podcasts and recovery coaching videos, tons of stuff in there. And then ways that you can support the growth of our channel by donating, becoming a member, getting yourself some branded merch. It's all down in there. So check it all out. Thank you again for checking this out today. Wishing you a blessed 24 in your recovery, and we'll see you again tomorrow.